Lappland Refined Horrormare, one of my favorite arts in all of Arknights, and easily one of the most premium figures I've ever had the pleasure of unboxing. Now everything down to the box is so immaculately detailed. It's adorned with the clean Arknights theming with that holographic tint on the letters that gives it a beautiful pearlescent look. Unfortunately, Lappy's fat ass did bust up the box, puncturing it in 2 places, but better box damage than figure damage, am I right? Now, I'm rarely ever compelled to make an entire video on an individual figure since there's simply not enough to talk about, but Lappland Horrormare is a different story. Not only is this one of my most anticipated figures of 2025, it's the perfect mix of beautiful art, great craftsmanship, and an excellent figure. I feel like all my biggest figure boxes are from Arknights because this is another one that barely fits on my table. Shipping was around 13,000 yen and EMS was the only option. So if you buy her from Amiyami, the price is pretty much just around $400. But I'll say it right now, she's definitely worth it. Even though I barely read the story, barely play the game, and only log on to do my dailies, I really like Arknights figure design. Their character designs are simply just that good. And Arknights just fills a niche that no other IP really does. This well-worn, tactical look with a good sprinkle of cute, cool, and downright crazy. You can almost smell the dust and gunpowder from the world Arknights builds, but even that's like a breath of fresh air compared to all the boobs and butts you get in every other gacha game. Every figure from Arknights is exactly 1/7 scale. I have no idea what sort of death grip license Hypergrip has on manufacturers, but having all the figures be the same scale is brilliant. You already have Texas 1/7 scale, why not get a matching 1/7 scale Lappy to put beside her? There's just one less barrier when buying another figure, and they look damn fine when displayed together. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this, but Lappy has one of the weirdest blisters I've ever seen. It's almost like the plastic's been warped by the heat. Like, is this supposed to look like this? It's got some pointy parts which busted up the box, and honestly, I can't tell if this is some 5-head protection, or I'm just dumb and Lappy's blister was cooked. Oh yeah, you don't get any instructions with this figure, you get a piece of paper with a QR code instead. I will of course completely ignore the QR code since I'm recording with my phone, and insert the spear completely backwards. Assembly isn't that hard without instructions, but one of the marble statues doesn't fit all the way into the peg, which is a bit weird. But aside from that, Lappland Horrormare is phenomenal. A grand base, dynamic pose, and a perfect sculpt and paint job. What more could you ask for? The marble statues really look like marble. The color, the texture, the cracks, and the feather on the wings are just so finely sculpted. They've also put a lot of thought into it. The statues and base are slightly softer PVC, so they're pretty light and don't add much to the figure's overall weight. For such a big figure, she is fairly light at 1,200 grams, heavier than Texas, but lighter than the more compact Mito Surtur. But she also doesn't fit in a Detolf, so I suppose overloading a Detolf shelf isn't that big of a concern. The paint job on the figure is fantastic, with all the different blood splatters having different amounts of gloss, so certain splotches look more dried out than the others. The chainmail linking her sleeves to her coat, the cross on her shirt, and the skull necklace, everything down to the buttons on her coat are just so finely sculpted, and the tears and fraying on the edge of her coat and sleeves just looks so good. And this, I really like this part. The Oregonium crystals on her legs just barely peeking out from under the coat, and they're so well integrated. There's no seams, no paint overlap, just beautiful lappy thighs. Then her boots. They're finely wrinkled with a nice gloss finish. For some minor nitpicks, the base is detailed, but there are some noticeable seams where certain parts were put together. It's not really something you notice until you look for it, but since the base and statues are almost double the price of the base figure, maybe this is something you care about? Personally, I don't really care. Finally, her face. Lappy's face is perfect. The bloody scratches, the scar over her eye, and the slight depth to her teeth, instead of just being painted onto her face, just gives it that slightly more genuine feeling. And her bangs. The 2-layer bangs are just so nice, and the way that so many strands just flow out the back of her hair gives this figure so much impact. I've seen a lot of figures ruined by chunky, plasticky looking hair, but I've never seen a figure that's been so elevated by the hair sculpt before. Like, the hair on this figure is by far the best I've seen on any figure. And lastly, her swords are incredibly detailed. Finely sculpted skulls, a grungy wrapped handle, and the 2-tone metallic finish with blood and grunge covering the blade. It also has that super simple futuristic font with 01 and 02 on each blade, and that's just like the cherry on top. If you like detailed weapons, you'll probably love this figure. All in all, this figure is just absolutely peak. If I were to put any character bias aside, it might just be my new number one figure. If I had any critiques, it's definitely the tail. Since it's hidden by her hair and coat, you don't see a lot of it, but it really lacks the attention to detail her hair had. And it kinda just feels like a solid chunk of plastic if you examine it closely. The other thing I really don't like is probably her dress shirt thing. In the original art, it really felt more loose with the shape of her leg being visible through the fabric, but in the figure, it kinda just feels like a plain skirt. It is a bit boring, like a blank section when the rest of the figure has so much detail, but it might just be a nitpick. And one last thing, it'd be her breasts. For some reason, Lappland has Schrodinger's tits. Sometimes she's flat, sometimes she's huge, sometimes she's normal. I feel like the shirt stretch and shading on this figure give her breasts a bigger feeling than the original art, but then again, the last Lappland figure did have huge breasts, so I can't really say much objectively. I guess it comes down to everyone's personal preference and their impression of Lappland. I never E2'd her 5-star form with my Lappland at level 1, so my impression of her is still her E0 form, which is completely flat. But if you really like her well-endowed E2 form, you might also be a bit disappointed by this figure. Honestly though, I really don't care about the size of her breast that much, it's just always changing, so I thought it was worth mentioning. I know it sounds like I'm complaining a lot, but all in all, these barely dent the overwhelming presence she has. Alter clearly knows where to focus their efforts, so the details on this figure stand out so much you really don't notice these little nitpicks unless you're looking for them. And something else I just noticed was the bluish purple gradient on the inside of her cloak. The inside of her fur coat is also completely sculpted, so definitely something you'll really only notice if you have the figure displayed higher up, which is something I'd recommend for this figure since she is looking downwards a bit, so it'd be a bit weird if you put her below eye level. Another thing is her panties have a pinkish tint. Not what I'd expect from Lappy, but yeah, just in case you guys were curious. Now, Arknights has a lot of figures, but out of all the insane figures they've released so far, Lappland Horrormare might just be the best one. Schwartz and Scatty have a bit more impact, but when you look at the details, Lappland does come out head and shoulders above the rest. However, all these Arknights figures don't really fit in Detolfs, so I gotta figure out where to put her. So for now, thanks for watching. Peace. Oh yeah, while I was editing this, they announced E2W. If she looks anything like her prototype, Lappy is just cooked.